So Colwell follows a postmaster in a rural community played by Karen Allen, who's been running this office for 35 years, and she receives notice that it's going to close in a month. And so she's debating whether to face that and retire or to relocate and start over.
So what's the inspiration for this film? How did this film come about?
A friend was telling me about his town in western Pennsylvania that is actually not on the map any longer because they lost their post office. And then the zip code got combined with the town over, and so they essentially lost their town name altogether. And I thought that was interesting that this woman retired and they lost their identity all around. And so I started to develop the story out of that.
So, I told you before the interview I'm a stamp collector, and we don't see many female postmasters in the big cities, but you're telling me it's quite common in the rural towns.
Yeah, we went around to about 22 communities, some of which had already lost their post office, some of which were still fighting. And in most of them, the postmasters were female, not all of them. And so I started writing the character. She started to take shape, and it just felt right. And also, I think you don't get to see many actresses on screen of that age having, a full film to carry. And there were so many talented actors out there, and so we were really excited about that.
Talk about the casting and what was the process in casting for this film? Because, like I said, there's not many female, postmasters that we know about, so they're kind of a rare breed and quite, a certain character that they need.
Yeah, I wanted someone who could, when we were casting the film, I wanted someone who could blend in with the actual rural community. We knew we were going to use a lot of non-actors, and so I had seen that Karen Allen was living up in the Berkshires, and she has a knitwear shop up there. And I saw a little news clip of her working on her loom and then being out with the people. And, I knew her from, like everybody from Raiders of the Lost Ark and Animal House, and to see her kind of in town being this beloved figure, it felt like I was watching my film. And so much of the film is very quiet, and I wanted someone who had that kind of gravity, who you could just watch, really kind of fully embody that character, and at the same time who would be very believable being a community member. And Karen really struck that balance.
So where did you guys film the film, and how many days did it take, and what were some of the challenges that came with it?
So we shot Colwell in northeast Pennsylvania, about 20 minutes outside of Wilkes-Barre, in a town called Tunkhannock, and also with a community from Knoxon, Pennsylvania, who had lost their post office in 2012. We shot initially for 18 days, and then we did 4 days of pickups almost a year later. In terms of challenges, I think it was a tonal balance between the community story and Nora's story, because for me, I was most interested in what she was going through and sort of facing retirement, but also her routine breaking down, which is really how she knows how to connect with people. And so every day she opens this window and the community comes to her. And when that goes away, she doesn't really know how to go knock on someone's door and start a conversation. I feel like that's relatable at 25 or 40 or 65. And so that was the heart. At the same time, the community story was important. And I think if you put too much weight on that, then the audience starts to expect Norma Rae or something where she's going to fight back and they're going to win. And it's not that film. It's going to be very careful, both in the writing and the production and also in the edit, to balance those two things so that you can really hook in with her storyline and her sense of loss and her sense of like yearning for connectivity.
What was it like showing up in these small towns with cameras and lights and stuff? Did the local community embrace you guys? Of course, they were curious what you guys were doing.
Yeah, we weren't sure how it would be working with the community. We're bringing most of our crew was coming in from Brooklyn. We're shooting in rural Pennsylvania. We didn't know if that would all mesh, and they completely opened their doors and welcomed us in. And our co-producer, Maggie Ambrose, went to the fall fair the first weekend there and put on an apron and served cider all day, and by the end of the day, she knew the whole town. And it continued that way all the way through the production. And I think, what Kathy Pauley is a community member there who fought the post office closure for about 2 years. She's third generation. She's lived in the house her great-grandfather built in 1895. And, what she told us is it was the first good thing to happen in the community. They had lost their school in the 70s, their factory in the 70s and their school in the 90s, and then they lost their post office, and there's really nothing left. And I think for them, they just feel like they're not heard and not cared about. And so the fact that we could, come in and just help amplify their voices, I think, they felt seen, and that was really important.
In movies, when we talk about a post office, we think of the Pony Express, we think of
Sure.
old westerns, but we're really focusing on the post office in current times. And how important was that for you to spotlight the post office, the postal service, and what they really mean to the community? Because you said that, once the post office goes away, a lot of times that zip code goes away. As that zip code goes away, the town name goes away a lot of times. So how important is the post office to our daily lives in the world of email and instant messenger and texts?
Yeah, initially when we started writing this, it's something I struggle with because I, don't always love going to the post office. I don't think most of us do. If you're in a community where you don't need it the same way, going out to these rural communities, what I found is some of them would call it their town living room. They go and there's a lending library and there's coffee and you can bring your dog and people hang out. And it's almost like a coffee shop.
Similar to what a barber shop was in the 20s and 30s for men.
Very similar to like a barber shop or a hardware store that some of the towns, up in Great Barrington, I know they had a hardware store where we would go get coffee in the morning. And it's really where a lot of those towns become a community. And so much of their identity is tied up there in terms of their both interpersonal way, but also in terms of their name. And, in some areas, if you have 800 or 1,000 people living in the town and there's no other landmark and they take away your post office, then that town starts to vanish and get absorbed by whatever's next to it. And initially that was a bigger part of the film. It started to recede more to the background, but it was very much still why we wanted to tell this story, because I felt like that's important. It's something I knew nothing about. And on one hand, I empathize with the Postal Service because they have a business to run and we are using email, and Amazon has their shipping service, and there's all kinds of things that are legitimate challenges about that. At the same time, I empathize with the people on the ground who have no say in that conversation. And many times their office is profitable because people rely on it very intensely and they don't cost a lot to run. But when you're combining multiple towns and those are carrier routes, it's a different conversation for the Postal Service. And so, it's a really complex problem, and I think we never really wanted to I was less interested in critique than observation, and to sort of help give them a voice so that people are at least aware of what they're going through. Because in 2011, the Postal Service had put 2,700 offices up for potential closure, and most of those were in rural communities or inner city communities that rely on them very intensely in a way like most of us don't.
Right.
And so I think we see that headline, we're like, of course you're going to close down the post offices, but in those areas it means something very different.
So what it means to you to come to Bentonville Film Festival. We're in a small town, even though Walmart is a dominant employer in this area, but what it means to come to a small town and have them showcase a film with a lead female character, because Bentonville Film Festival is all about inclusion and women in film. What does it mean to have your film in this festival?
It's been great to come to Bentonville because for one, I knew nothing about Arkansas. And so it's been a great, brief glimpse into one part of the state. And I think, it's so nice to be able to go up into a Q&A and look out, and so much of our audience is reflected there. A lot of women who either have retired or looking to retire, and for them to be able to see themselves on screen. On one hand, it feels like, for me, in a pretty privileged position, it feels almost like a low bar to have to hit to just have a female protagonist, but it ends up being so rare. I feel really grateful to be just part of the community here this week and to meet the other filmmakers. I think because the way the film festival here is run, since it has this mission statement that's about caring for each other and listening to each other, it creates a great kind of interaction between the filmmakers, the staff, the volunteers, the audience. Everybody here is very open. And for me, it's just been like a nice week to listen and reflect on what kind of work I'm making, how I can do better, and also like what I'm watching and taking in.
So what's next for you professionally, and what's next for the film?
Professionally, I have another project I'm writing that I'm hoping to shoot later in the year. We are going to be doing festivals probably all through the fall. And so we're still lining those up. This was just our second festival screening. And so we did San Francisco last month, which was fantastic for the premiere. And I think we're excited to both hit, some of the larger festivals, but also a lot of these regional festivals where we get to be in the kinds of communities that we filmed in. And then we're looking forward in the fall to going back and showing it up in Tunkhannock where we shot the film, and to be able to have the community members there and for them to get a chance to see themselves up on the big screen and to talk out kind of, their feelings about the film and what they've gone through.
That's awesome. What's the website for the film?
We mostly use the Facebook page for the film, which is just Colwell Movie. And then you get all the reviews there, all the upcoming screenings there.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you.